Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're doing well. It was a compelling day today. I'm Chris Hamm. I work for CyberReds, and I lead our sales engineering team. And I am from Minneapolis, Minnesota, I mentioned earlier today. I worked for Pillsbury and ended up working for Burger King down in Florida. Heavy background in web technologies, and I was also CISO at Burger King. You won't see it in my title because it took me 2 years to actually push and fight for us to get a dedicated security team. Is that better? I can lean in a little bit too. Does that work? Yeah. Okay, is that better? Cool. Okay, so I came from Pillsbury and was down with Burger King, where I owned a lot of the web things, and I was a former CISO down there for a couple years before I moved to the vendor side. And I couldn't be more excited today. And if you want after too, I've got pictures of me in the Burger King costume, the creepy one from the ads. Because of my height, they used to ship it into our floor where AV was, and I would go floor to floor like that Quiznos ad where they would play music and I would get us excited about the next initiatives that we have. But I could be more excited because this is the most important thing for me to hear from our leaders and to hear from you about what you're facing and the things that we'll be discussing today. And with the panel, we'll be talking about communicating to the business and the C-level. That's always been one of the things that was one of the most challenging for me. I'm really excited for the panel and happy to let them each introduce themselves. But I have Tom with Cummins, Tina with Sleep Number, and Judy with SureScripts. And so I'll let them each introduce themselves here briefly, and we'll go ahead and we'll jump into the conversation. I think this is going to be a great panel too, because I don't know if you all saw Jeff's lunchtime presentation, but it was all about storytelling. And I'll tell you right now, that's been a big thing in my career. Even my team and myself, when we go out and talk to customers like you, so many times you fall in the feature function trap. Like, we do this, we do that. And so even as a professional with my team, it's always about, why does that matter? What's the moral of that thing you're trying to show? And so I'm really excited for us to talk about the storytelling today. And I'll let the panel introduce themselves.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Kim, for such an awesome event. It's an honor for me to be here today. My name is Tina Meeker, and I'm the Senior Director of Information Security for Sleep Number. I lead the security organization for the company. I've been with Sleep Number for, just about 2 years, and it's gone by really fast because we're having a ton of fun. I actually have a couple of team members here today who are somewhere in the audience. Devin Koss and Jake Rutledge are here as well. There we go. There they are. I started in the cybersecurity industry back before it was actually an industry. I actually grew into the industry from originally being a technical writer. So back in 2004, as a consultant or contract technical writer, I kind of worked my way onto some projects where I was writing security policy, and everything blossomed from there. So since that time, I've spent a lot of time in the retail industry, Target, Best Buy, also Shutterfly, and then also I've spent some time with manufacturing, medical device, and banking.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Judy Hatcher. I am the Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer at SureScripts. Really excited to be here today. This is my first FutureCon event, and so I'm very honored to be on the panel with my peers. And I've been at SureScripts about 2 years. Prior to that, I was at Fairview. I, too, have been in cybersecurity for a very long time. I've been in multiple industries, manufacturing, retail, healthcare. But with my current role, I not only have cybersecurity, but I have physical security as well as enterprise risk management. And because SureScripts is the nation's largest healthcare network for e-prescribing, so when you go to the doctor's office and they say, what pharmacy do you want me to ship that to? That goes across our network. I also have e-prescribing fraud, which has been a whole nother world for me to get to understand, and very, very fascinating that what these bad guys do, or even like what these doctors do just to make money. So ransomware, yes, is a very, very, very significant concern for me, but as I look at what's happening with the opioid industry, I also pay very close attention to that too, so.
Good afternoon, Tom Erickson. I'm not a CISO, sorry for your disappointment. I'm just one of those guys, one of those darn directors. 20 years military police experience. The last 5 years, I had the additional opportunity, since I was the only one that owned a personal computer, 286, 40 megabit hard drive. So I got to learn Novell. I got to learn a lot of technology before I retired. I went straight into working not in law enforcement, but I was first the help desk tech, the server tech, the email tech, the network infrastructure. I moved to Yorktown Naval Weapons Station, and I was their senior network tech for, and that was quite an experience working for the Navy. I moved back to Minnesota. Why, I have no idea. Because it's cold out. My kids wanted to come back, see Grandma and Grandpa, and I told them it wasn't a big deal. But I worked for Siemens for 15 years. I was their deputy director of information and corporate security. And one day I got a new boss, and he said, Tom, I want you to move to Orlando. And I said, Tom, don't move to Orlando. And so I am with Cummins. I am the global director of security operations, and very, very happy in that position. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thanks for all of you, and Tom for that too. I actually came back from the same to Minnesota, and it's been a little bit rougher with the winters, but no better tailgating before the Vikes on that one for sure. So as security leaders, let's just start out with the more general. What do you see as some of the biggest communication challenges as you've talked up to the board, to the C-level, about some of the security initiatives and things that you're trying to get across to them? What are some of the main communication challenges that you've typically seen or run into?
Well, as you mentioned, Chris, I think Jeff Norham's keynote today was so relevant and ties really well into this discussion. It's really around storytelling. Some of the key challenges, and I've seen this with other members within security just throughout my career, they bring too much information to board members. Many times board members have, they're moving chess pieces, right? They're not in the trenches. They're not involved in the day-to-day. Don't assume they even know what PCI is. So it's really important for you to be able to articulate and not assume that they know what all of the acronyms that are very natural and hardwired into us are. But at the same time, boards are now starting to bring on new board members that do have technical prowess. So at the same time of making sure that you are simplifying your information for the board, speaking in the language of business, also be prepared to dive into technologies if those new board members are asking you to dig into those technologies while you present.
Thank you. My current board, where I'm at, they're made up of pharmacies and doctors, and I think I have one CFO on our board as well. And so cybersecurity is not second nature. So along with being able to do that storytelling and making it relevant, you have to speak in terms that they understand. We live in, like Tina said, we live and breathe it every day, so it's second nature to us. And it is challenging sometimes to get them to understand what the real risk is, because they're thinking of other things as board members. In my previous role, I had a very engaged board. They were very technical minded. They asked a lot of questions. They liked the data, the raw data, but I will tell you from what I've learned and all the different CISOs I've talked to, that is kind of abnormal. You don't really typically get board members that want to dig into the weeds that much. And so it is really about being able to land the message with them so that they understand the risk, they understand what questions to ask, and they understand the answers that are being presented back to them. You've got to give them information that's going to get them engaged, to want them to learn more, to know more, but also help them understand that they're also responsible for cyber risk. And I think that's one thing that they probably sometimes don't always realize, is that's one of their board responsibilities. And so it's your job to make sure that they understand that.
Well, they cover about everything. But you definitely have to be able to speak their language. Do not speak technical to them. Storytelling today, what an as I tell my folks, if you're going to show me metrics, the metrics have to tell me a story, and you have to be able to tell that story to me, and that I understand it as a fifth grader. I will tell you, we have moved far. I think the new SEC rulings, if it goes into effect, where a breach has to be reported within 4 days, will get your board's attention real quick now. Plus, you have to report any breach you've previous. That's going to get your board attention. But there are people. We worked long and hard, and I'll tell you, we just had our board meeting, and our CEO Tom Weinberger got up and told all the board the 3 objectives this year for Cummins. Number 1, hydrogen. Number 2, supply chain. Number 3, cybersecurity. So it's a slow haul, but you'll get there.
That's awesome.
That's great, thank you. And the communication is one thing, and Tom, I love to hear that that was one of the top three, because Judy, you mentioned something else that's interesting. So do the boards and non-security business leaders really care about cybersecurity, or is it something that we're just telling ourselves?
So similar to Cummins, Sleep Number also assesses the top risks facing the organization. Cybersecurity has been in the top 5 since I joined the company 2 years ago. And actually this year we got bumped down from 3 to 5, and it's really due to 2 things. The supply chain risks, which kind of came out of nowhere, and then also talent management. So we've all heard about the Great Resignation, and so those actually surpassed cybersecurity, but we're in the top 5, so we're locked in, and we definitely are seen as very important.
For us, it's my CISO must appear before the board once a year, and but he goes to the audit committee quarterly, and that audit committee, Mr. Herdman, is very, very interested in cybersecurity.
I think all boards are interested in it. I just don't think they understand it. I think it's something that they have a hard time getting their arms around. And so back to what Jeff was saying earlier today, you've got to make it personal. You know, when in one of my previous roles, when we were rolling out multi-factor authentication, we talked about you use it already in your daily life. And so getting them to understand and make that connection for what they're doing in their daily life and what it means to their job and how they're protecting data. But they have a different mindset. And so I think they really care about it. They want to hear about it. I think they just really want to understand it better. So they, like I said before, so they know what questions to ask. And even if they ask the questions, they understand the answers that are coming back.
I think it's helpful too that the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, periodicals that executives are reading and referencing in the business section, in the tech section, ransomware is everywhere. So it is definitely something that they are seeing on a day-to-day basis as they inform themselves.
I love that too. I can't tell you the amount of time. This goes back to 2000, 2005 timeframe of trying to push through initiatives and programs, and then something pops up on CIO magazine, and then that's the next project that we're doing. So that was really good. From a supply chain perspective, we've heard a bit about that today. There's a supply chain for both the electronic side of how everything works together, but there's also the supply chain within a business itself. That'd be a curious piece. I like to understand better. So if you take Sleep Number, where you actually have a physical supply chain within your business, what have you seen from impacts? Because that's grown exponentially from both either how your business works from supply chain and suppliers you work with, or have you seen that impact from supply chain as far as technology and the risks there?
So supply chain is a very complex topic, and Sleep Number is not only a retailer, it is also a manufacturer, it is also a technology company. Those of you who are Sleep Number bed owners, if you've purchased a bed in recent years, all of our beds are smart beds. They all have an app. They give you a sleep score based on a number of factors. So there's a lot of sensitive data that is being sent to Sleep Number so that they can deliver you that Sleep Number score. From a third-party risk standpoint, we have rapidly made our third-party risk capability robust in a very short amount of time. Actually, Devin Koss, who's in the room, leads that function for our team, and her team has done an amazing job at really assessing our ecosystem of critical third parties. You know, internally within the organization, we are Sleep Number is arranged in kind of a unique way. So we have our corporate IT department, and then we have a division out in San Jose, California that really runs our Sleep IQ apps. And then also our .com presence is managed through marketing. So we have within the organization, we kind of have organizations within organizations, and each area has really its own IT approach. The information security team that I lead is an enterprise information security team that, you know, that runs through all of those groups. But there certainly are some challenges with being able to influence. You know, the tooling is different in each of those areas. So there are certainly some challenges that we're working through. So developing those partnerships and developing trust is incredibly important.
Engines. I will tell you, supply chain is like anything else, and it's the day in and day out care of cyber hygiene. that goes across the board. I think we all see that. Multi-factor authentication. Who are your suppliers? How are they connected to you? Because some are going to be connected physically, and we need to understand that, especially if there's a breach or incident, so you can react very quickly. We're getting the same thing, very tough on vendor backgrounds. And I talked to my DR folks, and I tell them we need to start figuring out what could cause us to go down and hurt our business. Because I'm thinking about Toyota last week, where they had a third-party partner couldn't ship plastic snap-on parts. They had to shut a factory down. And so I'm asking now the same questions to my supply leaders. Say, can you please identify this, and let's get some controls and protections in place.
Although we don't have a widget, we do see it from the technology side, the supply chain issues that you have on the technology side. So when you're looking at doing different projects that require additional capacity, additional hardware for your data centers, the ship dates and the restraints that were had there are really, really significant for us. And so we see it more on that side than we do because we don't have a physical widget that we sell. So.
Great, thank you for that. And I was hoping to be more of a couch up here too, because I didn't say at the beginning, but I felt this was my chance to be a little bit like Michael Strahan today in hosting this together, where this almost looks like a little bit more Senate inquiry with the way we're set up. But to continue on with that, Judy, I think of with SureScripts, for instance, right? Because there's communication up to your internal company, but then also to sometimes you have partners. Us at Burger King, the franchises were really pretty separate with their own business from headquarters. Do you have instances where you also need to not only communicate up to your direct management and board, but some of those partners or supporting businesses to help them through these security things that are happening out there?
Yeah, so we do. We have customers, we have partners, we have third-party partners that sometimes we're the first ones to tell our third-party partners that they've been breached, meaning their email servers have been compromised because we're the one that gets phished. And I've seen this in my previous role too. They don't come after us directly; they'll go after our third party, which then try to get to us. So we've had to have those tough conversations. We've had to have those really like, hey, this is what we saw, and so we had to take action. And the deer in the headlight looks from some of them that we have on these calls, they're like, we don't know where that's coming from. We don't know what's going on. It is a tough call to have, but they appreciate it in the end, like after they've gone through a little bit of the little shock and awe about what we've seen or what we have. They do come around and they're like, you know what, we really appreciate you taking the time. Like we go through extenuous efforts to reach out to them. And like if our call tree isn't working, we start going to LinkedIn and trying to find out who works at that company that we can get a hold of and have that conversation with. So we have played that role with them because we are that conduit between the pharmacies and the providers. And we have a lot of third parties all the way around when we look at that.
Yeah, for those who don't know, there's only about 3 corporations that build large trucks nowadays. And Paccar, I think, builds 3 to 4 of those models. So we're constant in contact. And I can tell you, they are very first to knock on my door and say, hey, we're getting this email. Why are we getting it? Why isn't your DMARC picking it up? It's mine. But again, it's just relationships, but they trust you that you're going to deliver, you're going to be there. There's nothing worse than a third-party breach, and you have to reach out and try to get to their CIO, CTO, ISO, and try to have them explain what happened because they don't want to talk to you.
So we've heard a lot about the power of storytelling today and communicating up to leadership. What are some other techniques and ways that you found effective outside of storytelling to have that conversation?
Relationship building. So, we're just coming out of the pandemic, and it's been really difficult in the past couple years. So during my career, I'm an extrovert, right? I've been successful at building partnerships and trust and friends. Hey, let's go have lunch. Let's go have a beer. And building relationships is incredibly important, especially with peers, right? On honestly, I have more success communicating upward and influencing upward than I do within my peer group, right? Because everyone has their goals and their objectives, and in many cases, we all know, we in security, we often are asking people to do something they don't want to do, right? So that competes with their objectives, right? So there needs to be that negotiation. So relationship building, being prudent, right? We can't be hair on fire. Yes, you might find a lot of risks. Everything's critical. The sky's falling. You really need to be prudent and have a good business sense. So relationship building, I think, is incredibly important.
I will tell you visuals. Pictures say 1,000 words. And you will be amazed at the questions that you get when you put a picture in front of somebody. And that's at the board level too. And when Jeff was talking about metrics and how you present metrics, the way that I have to present metrics is in a deck. And I don't get the opportunity to explain that deck. So I have to make sure that my visual tells the story for me with very little words. And it's interesting, the comments that we get back. Relationship building is a huge one. There's no doubt about it. And the other piece of it I would tell you is have fun with what you have with your job. I mean, when you're talking about Cybersecurity Awareness Month, do something really fun that engages people. And that is a great way to build those relationships and get them to have some of those aha moments. We've had a blast the last 2 years doing it. Even virtual, we've had a blast doing the last 2 years.
Trust, relationship building, and that they trust you, because you probably all had projects out there that they got a bunch of money and the project went, oh my Lord, it was awful. So next time they go for money, they're not going to get money. So I always make sure that whatever I'm asking for, I have a reason, and they trust me because I produce. But overall, if talk in their language, don't scare them. I'm so done. I'm so done of the sky is falling. The sky is falling, and somebody grabs the scissors and they're running down the hallway with their hair on fire. Talk to them as adults, as we all are, and give them great visuals. Even talk the story visual of why this isn't so important and why it's so heartfelt for us.
Yeah, I would also comment too that not every situation is the sky is falling, and for you to be able to be calm during that will also, help you build relationships, because then they understand that if there is a time where maybe your voice or your octaves change in your voice, they'll understand that this is really serious. The whole thing of FUD is really, fear, uncertainty, and doom, and that used to be tactic maybe 10 years ago, but not anymore, because cybersecurity is it's there. So.
I do have a tinfoil cowboy hat. So I've kept it in my office. Historically, it's actually, it just reminded myself, it's not in my Sleep Number office, and that's on my list of to-dos.
That is awesome. I love that. I wish we had it here today for the happy hour. The empathy and the connection, I think, is really important to Tom, as you said. And in fact, I thought today what was so great when they were talking about security policy and communicating out to the business, like just ways to have people connect with that. And I was sitting there going, gosh, that's like the most basic idea. But how powerful and how important is that, right? So tying back to having fun, trying to get people engaged. I gave Jameson some nice props on his session near the end of the day, because he told such a great story about those threats that were out there and the projects he did with the malware and all those kind of things. And it's like, I looked around the room and everybody was just at the edge of their seat, right? So I think that combination of fun, going back to that connectedness and empathy is really important as well. And Tom, you also said about the FUD, right? That's one that we know a lot in our industry, being on the industry side, but even internally, I think you're right, taking that approach. And do cybersecurity leaders overall need to develop more business skills to be effective in these communications?
Absolutely. So knowing the business, so I do have an MBA, and just getting an MBA doesn't make you magically knowledgeable about all areas of business, but I think it's a wonderful way for especially technologists to understand the language of business across the board. So when you have risks that you are bringing to the marketing group or the finance group or the HR group, you know what they care about, and you can provide the right context.
I agree. I came from the Army. I briefed 4-star generals on plans, and going to a board is twice as scary. But you have to understand the business. You have to understand your products they're making, how they're being made, where they're being made, what goes into them. Because when you have that knowledge and you can have a conversation with somebody, and they see that, it'll go so much better. And and the other thing is, you don't always have to win. I always look for a win-win. I may not get everything I want, but darn it, they're not either. But we walk both the way that thinking that we both got what we wanted. So.
I'd agree with what both has been said. The only comments that I will add is, cybersecurity professionals are in a really tough spot. We not only have to know all the threats, all the tools, how to protect everything, how to process everything, how to investigate, all the different facets of our job, but we also have to know everything about our business. We have to know our business products. We have to know how finance operates. We have to know how marketing operates. You have to have your pulse into all of it, where the people on the other side of the table, they know that, security is a thing, and I know I'm not supposed to do certain things, but they don't have to understand all the backgrounds that we have and everything that we do behind the curtain. And so being able to understand the business, talk to the business, use business speak, relate to the business, and have those relationships is all part of leadership. I just had a conversation with somebody from one of our higher education institutions here in town about, when people come out of getting their MBA, like you said, it doesn't automatically make you a leader. There's things you have to learn how to do. You have to have that intelligence to be able to have presentations, to get up and speak in front of groups, and to sometimes be able to have the tough conversations that, it isn't really good out there right now. We've got a problem. We've got to fix it. And how you handle yourself, how you present yourself to the board, how you promote your team, how you build those skills, they're all very, very critical, rather than just, I've got a really cool tool and I'm really going to go find out what's going bad in our organization. There's all different facets as a cybersecurity leader that you need to make sure that you maintain.
And I think that goes back to the rapport with the business acumen in a lot of ways, which actually, it's great being up here because I get all these little clicks and connections in my head that I hadn't thought about before. And I think a really important one that, Tina, you had just called out was about the peers. Because if you're talking to communicating up to the board, I'll share a quick story. A number of years ago, had our worldwide head of sales, and we had just hired a great regional sales leader. And I was in the conversation with the head of sales, and the regional leader was also talking to the generalist sales leader about a requisition for a sales hire that they disagreed on. And it was one of my eye-opening moments because the worldwide head of sales said to me, he says, he just failed his first test, the new regional leader, because he could get into agreement to that, as Tom said, win-win situation. So even before going up to that communication, there's that expectation that leaders will work together to get to that win-win situation. So when we've gone through a lot of the vulnerabilities this past year and the increase in those, as you've gone through that and communicated up to leadership, was it more centered around the tactical fix? Hey, we're on this, we know about it, we're doing some things. Or were you able to get to the point where you could talk more about the impact of the business, whether it's the revenue impact, the applicability to that vertical, annualized loss expectancy that these threats are around? Have you found a way to quantify that better to terms of the business as you're going through those remediations?
So I've been with Sleep Number for 2 years. And when I joined the company, the security team was 6 people, and now we have over 20. So we've grown very rapidly, and we've been on a maturity journey. We certainly have a long way to go. One of the things we implemented recently, especially in light, and it was prior to Log4j, there was another major breach that happened. But what we did is we now send out a threat bulletin. And the threat, it's not a newsletter. The threat bulletin is only crafted if there's a major industry event, and it usually prompts questions. Immediately I'll get texts from my boss, the CIO, like, what are we doing about this? So we rapidly work with corporate communications. We craft a threat bulletin. It goes to the CEO's direct reports and key business leaders throughout the company. It articulates what that threat means to the organization, if Sleep Number is potentially impacted, and what our actions are. And then depending on the magnitude of the event and its applicability to the organization, then we'll have follow-up communications beyond that. We've received a lot of very positive feedback on that. And, you know, honestly, a large part of that threat bulletin is a warm and fuzzy for people, right? But it basically lets the right people know throughout the organization, we know about this, here's the potential impact, and here's what we're doing about it. It also helps gain support in, for instance, with Log4j, we had to remediate a number of things throughout the organization. That visibility's there. They saw who's copied on that email. And they seem to be more cooperative. It's worked out that way.
I will tell you what really the board was worried about during this whole time frame was, were they protected? It wasn't really business. It wasn't really what really when the what do they call it? The mass exodus. The Great Resignation. The Great Resignation. I will tell you, HR came down on us like no tomorrow. If we're skip stuff, making sure your people are all right. I already do that. So. But again, they're more worried about losing people. I don't know if it's because they trust us to protect them, which they shouldn't do. But I didn't see a real. I mean, we're going back to offices April 4th, after 2 years, so I'm very excited.
It wasn't just Log4j. If you go back to Print Nightmare, Print Logon, SolarWinds. I mean, it's, you name it. Every almost holiday where there was 1 0 day that was out there. And when I communicate about that, it's more that we're on it and what the impacts are, and then regular updates, keeping them informed, and making sure that you've got the collaboration of the teams that you need to get the work done in a very timely fashion, depending on the scope of the work that you have to do, depending on the 0 day that's out there. You may have 10 servers, you may have 5,000 servers, you may have 1 million lines of code, you may have 2 lines of code. But depending on what that scope is, they just want to know that you're on it and that we can manage it. And if we have any issues, we're escalating quickly to make sure that we're getting things addressed. But Log4j just wasn't the one that tipped us. I mean, these last 2 years have been crazy with 0 days. And your teams are working long hours trying to make sure that your IT teams, if you're not part of IT like I'm not, your IT teams are collaborating and patching and being due diligent and updating. So yeah, it's more of this that we're on it.
Great. Has anybody else done what Tina's done at Sleep Number as far as having examples where you're communicating more up to the business on what this means to us, or have that type of communication that she mentioned? Anybody else? Okay. No, it's just interesting because I think that's always been one of the big challenges, and I know a lot of us aren't there. I think there's such a great opportunity because what I thought of when you talked about the brief that you sent out was just that difference between knowing we are on it versus being like a knowledge expert on it almost, right? Yep. Where it's like we know, even if it doesn't get to how the business is effective, it's almost like your bulletin you put together says, we are not only taking care of this, but we have the knowledge behind it to give you that extra confidence. So I think that's really great that you've been able to do that. So thank you for that. Talking about talent, and I will date myself too, and I think a lot of things have moved on for me. My biggest ones were NIMDA and Code Red back in my days with Burger King. But the talent problem is really interesting to me because in what we do in sales, vendor-side sales engineering, you've got these huge territories. So it's been a problem forever for us and for me with my team because you take like Central US. I'm so used to working in IT here. Hey, I'm over at General Mills. I'm going to go over to Best Buy. Or I'm going to go over to Target, right? 3M maybe. And you've got the geographical boundaries there. And this is where I think I've been passed by a bit because even as we talked at lunch about this, I think your workforces are fairly distributed a lot more than even when I was back on the customer side, right? But do you see that as a challenge moving forward because of work at home and COVID, that now it's not just local Minneapolis with the talent within your security teams? Do you see that as being a reality that is a concern for you?
It is a concern, and I think it's critical to influence our partners in HR to ensure that we are offering salary ranges that are in line with what other companies are offering. At Sleep Number, our HR partners actually have done a fantastic job of proactively doing salary assessments. When we do annual reviews each year, they will actually flag certain individuals that, these people probably should receive an increase, a significant increase. If somebody is performing at a high level, we'll give spot bonuses. So, it's really around ensuring that, team members are happy, engaged. People don't quit their jobs, they quit their boss, so it helps to be a good boss too. And it's not perfect, right? People are always going to leave. I mean, a lot of times in this industry, just switching jobs can raise your salary by 25%. That's pretty significant, and that's life-changing. And so those instances are going to happen. But it's important to partner with HR to make sure that people are properly compensated.
I'd be hard-pressed to find out there was an organization where it wasn't a concern right now. And it's not just cybersecurity. There's, the legal field is going through the same thing. Your healthcare industries are going through the same thing. And Tina's already pointed out that, you got to take care of your people. And if you're treating them well, and they may get a salary offer, but if they like what they do, they're happy with the team, they like their location, and there's little things that you can give them, whether that's being able to work remote or, whatever that is, they're going to stay. They're going to stay. I mean, we've talked about it as an organization. I've talked to a lot of my peers about it. And you're right, Chris, it's no longer Best Buy stealing from Target, Target stealing from US Bank, Wells Fargo. It's no longer that, because you're now, with the way what COVID has done to us, it's just magnified that by 100 times. And so it's forcing the companies to be very flexible and create very hybrid situations where they don't always have to be in the office. So I'd be hard pressed to find an organization that's not concerned about it.
Yeah, and what I try to tell people is you go across the wall and the grass is a little bit greener on the other side. But once you get over there, you find out they have a worse lawnmower than you had on the other side. They make you put the manure out there and make wise choices. But I think it's being the boss, being a manager, being someone who cares. Every one of my team know they can call me at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't care. Call me. I talk to at least everyone. I have 43 people, so I talk to everyone at least once every 2 weeks. We have coffee mornings where we just come in our pajamas. Zoom call only. Zoom call only. But when someone has a baby, I send them a card. When I do something, I write a thank you note and I send it to them. Little things that they know that you care about them, I think, is very important, and you'll keep people.
With that one, I'm going to keep rolling with that, because that's where I wanted to get to, is let's get to some of the fun with it, right? I think culture and being present is a really key piece of this too. And you can combine it with COVID, right? With what everybody's gone through these past 2 years. And to Tom, the other thing you said about grass greener, I won't tell the story now, but if you'd love to hear about how I realized I was my parents in life, because this is a big conversation that I go with my team all the time too, as they look at other opportunities. But I got a great one for you about my brother and us making similar choices, and people have to kind of go experience it too, no matter how many stories you tell them. But even for me, I haven't got it working yet, but I've been trying to get virtual fibbage going with the team and some of these things, the coffee hour talks. So that would be the question. What types of things can you do culturally, or have you done outside of the monetary and those things to build that culture where people are that much more engaged and want to stay?
So really flexing to the unique needs of each team member. We are fortunate where there is no big push to bring people back to the office. It's really optional. Some people love to be in the office, and they are there 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week. Some people never want to see the office ever again. And so I think it's really around making sure that each individual is, is not pushed in a direction they don't want to go. So flexibility, I think, is really paramount.
There's a sheet that I was given, 3 weeks ago, about how do I like to be managed. And it was very eye-opening when you give that to your team, and you have conversations with them, you have one-on-ones with them, But when you ask those very frank questions about how do you like to be managed, you get a little bit more insight, at least for me, I've been there now almost 2 years, get a little more insight into what that means. But like you, Tom, I meet with my directs every other week, and I have skip levels once a quarter because it's important for me to have that connection with them and make sure that they're being heard. If they don't have, like they can talk to their manager, they're being heard. And it is being flexible and understanding what motivates them. Sometimes it is financial, sometimes it's, you know what, I don't need the financial piece. I just want to tell me that I'm doing a good job. Or I want to be able to go to the SANS training that costs $8,000. I want to be able to do this, you know, and finding out what it is, and they will, like I said, they'll stay, and being flexible. It's just not everything is a cookie cutter when it comes to employees and to people. But it is important, and we've done things like, we had a virtual happy hour before I even started, and it was every Thursday. In fact, I missed ours today. Every Thursday at 3:30, and everybody get on the call. And we have been told by many people that we've had visitors come in that we are the most fun virtual happy hour because we cover the gamut on everything. We've done even gaming. We go get Twitch online, and we will do gaming online just as, you know, compete against each other. We did a virtual, I think it was a llama farm in Georgia. I can't remember what it was that we donated to, and then we got to get a virtual tour of it. I'm actually convinced, I think, one of my employees now to do cooking on there because when we first started this, he was doing some really amazing, he was making dinner for his family because it was a different time zone. And it was always fun. And so I said, you need to come back and start cooking for us again. So it's just things like that keep people engaged, make them feel connected, and there's no pressure. It's not like they have to be there, but if you ever want to, you can pop in, and you can be there for 5 minutes. You can be there. It's only an hour, and we joke around, we laugh. We have HR there. We have my boss usually who comes in once in a while. We have our admin that comes in. It's just different people pop in and have conversations, and you get to know them on a much more personal level because then their family will pop in, which is always fun. So it's just being a nice way to stay connected. And as soon as we knew we could get together, even last summer, we went to a baseball game and just got to see people face to face, which was really nice. So.
Yeah, we're always acting silly. I'm the head silliness. Next week we're going to have our Shamrock Sweepstakes. So who can get the greenest? And there is a prize involved. And luckily, my people all work down in Columbus, Indiana, not up here in St. Paul. I wouldn't get anybody. I played a trick on a vendor, and when they were giving out, remember the meals? I'll send you 2 steaks and a bottle of wine. Guys, sign up for this. So one night we all zoomed on a vendor. Wasn't nice. He got the business. Don't worry. But I'm always thinking of something. I try to stay light. I used to be be the military. I was a very serious guy, and I'm getting too old. And offices, we're hybrid. And I've told my managers, if you're going to bring your team into the office, make sure it's planned, structured, and it's going to be fun. Just to bring them in to watch them, it's not going to be fun for you when I get a hold of you. We just have to have fun. I mean, I like the office because all my children are gone, and my wife doesn't work. Can we turn the camera off for a second? And I need some me time because I am going to retire here in 2 years, and I'm going to be home every day.
That was perfect, Tom. I really love the idea of the llama and the virtual, tour. These things that we can do in COVID. I've tried to investigate some of those things. Another fun one I haven't done with the team yet is my wife and I have taken Goldbelly classes where they've got chefs and they ship you all the ingredients and things. But any of those unique things that actually bring an opportunity for us for COVID are really cool and interesting. Anybody else out there had some really cool ideas on things that they've done with their teams through COVID? Perfect. And that was what I've been trying to get set up, so maybe we can talk after, because I know Fibbage is one of them for sure. And we got March Madness coming up too, so that could be a fun one.
We have a Discord channel that will just chat on various things after hours. It could be 3D printing, it could be cooking, it could be gaming, whatever.
Cool, very cool. Anybody else? Well, we've just got about 10 more minutes if everybody's still engaged and everybody want to keep going for a little bit longer. Okay, then we'll get to happy hour. One of the pieces we saw today is that 51% of CISOs felt that they weren't prepared or security leaders were not prepared for ransomware. That's a really interesting statistic. And where do you think, or do you think, that part of that is related to some of the communication challenges up to the board? Do you think communication plays a part of why that statistic is where it's at today?
I think it does. I do think it's critical to ensure that you're never guaranteeing that you won't get breached. So it doesn't matter how much funding, how many dollars you get for whatever project, whatever technology, new headcount. Thank you very much. I mean, I've been very fortunate over the last 2 years. The senior leadership team has been very generous. In fact, all of my asks in my tenure, I have not heard the word no. The only time I kind of got a no is when I asked for 2 headcount and they gave me 1. So they want to see an ROI on that, right? And the ROI is never going to be, and I convey this every single time, there is never a guarantee that we are 100% secure.
Our board and our company is very, very ransomware, and especially with the insurance rates we pay. Last year, we actually did a tabletop exercise with the entire enterprise. Then 2 days later, we switched over to all the C-level, and we had every C-level in that room for the tabletop of ransomware and the decisions that they were going to have to make. So,
I think tabletops are a great way to get that message and that awareness out and to get that buy-in, especially if you have the ability to be able to do a technical one and then a non-technical one like Tom just explained. And you have, if you don't have somebody that's skilled in-house to do it, because I would probably bet that anybody that's in this room has never dealt with a ransomware incident to the extent where it would take out your entire organization. So I would highly suggest you work with a third party that does incident response for ransomware, so they actually can work and really work that scenario to your advantage to make it customized for you. And they can answer those questions too when your technical teams want to poke holes in it. And if they understand your environment, they're going to be able to answer that, and they're going to make it as real as possible. So that is a great way to get the awareness out there. I think especially in healthcare, it's every day. I mean, every day there's breach notifications coming out from ransomware. And yes, you see it in manufacturing, you see it in some of the retail, not as much. You see it in education, you see it in city offices, but healthcare right now is unfortunately leading it quite heavily. And so my executive team is very aware, but prepared is being another thing. It's going through those tabletops, creating that muscle memory, and understanding what lever you have to pull when. How do you recover, or do you rebuild versus recover? What are the choices? Because there is a difference. And having those plays already in motion, so that if unfortunately something should happen in your organization, you know what you have to do, and you can recover, get your business back online quicker. And if you read some of these excerpts of these CEOs that have been in front of the Senate, and what they've gone through, or even you read some of these after-action reports of some of these companies, they're literally, because they never were prepared, and they're running through their data center and plugging cables as fast as they can. And, it's unfortunate. It's just really unfortunate. So it's just all about being preparedness and educating and making sure that your executive team knows, what's that playbook look like? What is that? How are we going to talk to? How do you deal with the social media? How do you deal with all your customers, and what does that look like? And because right now social media, it's the bad guys rat you out very, very quickly. If anybody is part of the information sharing groups, you'll see some of the comments that the bad guys put out there about you, and not anybody in this room, but just when somebody is hit with ransomware and what they taunt you with. And some of it's not very nice. And if you're not willing to play with them, they will expose you. And your communications team and your executives and your board need to be ready to be able to respond to that. And so having those real life scenarios around that is really, really critical, and having those playbooks. And maybe it's retainers. Maybe it's retainers with a outside communications firm that's going to be able to help you work through that if it's something unfortunate should ever happen. Don't ever pay the ransom. So in walking through the scenarios, because people say, well, we won't pay it. But then when you sit and say, well, what if they're going to taunt you? And your reputation is going to be tarnished. How are you going to handle that? Are you going to pay them just to see if they'll go away? What if they don't go away? Well, we're going to pay them to get our data back. Well, okay, what are you going to do with your data when you get it back? It's all walking through all of those different scenarios and really getting, like I said, not just your technical teams, but your executive teams thinking along those lines, and your legal teams, because it's amazing the conversations you will have when you go through those exercises, and it's very rewarding once you've been through it. You can create some really nice plans afterwards. Some projects may come out of it. Some tools may be bought, but it is a very, 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 very most worthwhile task to do.
And you just mentioned playbooks. Tactically very effective, but also it's knowledge capital, right? Things that keep knowledge within the organization. As we talked about the skill challenge before too, have you found effectiveness or considered, and what are your thoughts on some of the things out there for automation, where they talk about orchestration? Have you really found any value with those things that are out there? And have you considered or looked at, like outsourcing to try to help cover some of that skill challenge?
Well, since you mentioned SOAR, that's my $1 million project for this year. And I have a lot of hopes and dreams and wishes because I hope it does everything it says it's supposed to do, but there's so much background that you have to realize before you even start all the integrations. But again, I look at it in the use cases, make sure your use cases are spot on what you want to do, because I really look at SOAR to take a lot of manual work away from my analysts and let them really dig down on some of the meaty stuff and the threat hunting that I need.
I think you have to understand what it is you're trying to automate, and what does automation mean to you. You can even break it down to some of the simplest things. If you look at identity and access management, you're automating provisioning, you're automating deprovisioning. Right there is automation. It takes time to implement it, but it does save effort, time, dollars. You look at your threat hunting, what can you automate? What is it that you're trying to do? Are you trying to get the automation in place so that it can do the risk assessment for you, and whether that you need to have an analyst look at it to determine if you've got something going on, so that if maybe it's at a low enough score, it only happens once, it auto-closes a ticket, there's automation. So it depends on how you want to use automation, what area of your business you're automating, and what's the value of it. Because to simply say automation, there's so many pieces to it, and I think there's some false sense of security, or from a money savings, or even from what it actually means to do automation. So that's always my big thing is, well, what are we trying to do? Where does it make sense? And then there's the component that goes along with automation is optimization. So when you look at all your tools, yeah, you can automate, but have you optimized them so that you're using them to the fullest and making sure that they're working in the way that you want to? And then maybe after you get them working the way you want to, then there's pieces that you can automate, and you can use things like you said, XOR and things like that to do automation. But you have to understand your environment and kind of dig into it and see where the benefits are really going to be.
I agree. I mean, obviously, automation has a number of benefits, but it's critical to make sure that you have sound processes before you even think about automation, so you don't end up in a garbage in, garbage out situation.
That's a really good point. Thanks for that. And it sounds like there's some good tactical things you're seeing today with potentially those solutions and the hope, right? And I do not typically like to talk about product. I say those two specifically because my hope for the industry, and we've got our own solutions around these, but I push this internally too. Even take the response. We heard it today. There's a very small number of things that would intrigue me being in the chair that you're going to automate, especially outside of change control and things, right? My hope for that whole space is that they do focus more on this knowledge capital side, like ways you can make people more effective, maybe capture that knowledge for me. So if I'm running into some of these challenges, I've got great ways to get people more effective. And maybe a conversation after. I'd love to hear what you're hearing. It's not to position our stuff. I probably haven't watched enough of the messaging for SOAR out there, but that's a personal ideology for me that I think is the opportunity in the space for some of those solutions if you can get like a virtual knowledge teacher and expert too. So, well, thanks everybody for your time on the panel today and your participation from the crowd on some of the questions. Let's leave it for one more question for the panel. And I'll have one follow-up question as well, but what would be one takeaway you would give to a security leader wanting to be more effective communicating cybersecurity to the board and the business?
So I'm fortunate where, we talk about strengths and weaknesses or strengths and opportunities. Communications is a strength of mine, and it just naturally has been throughout my career. It's not a strength for everyone. I think there are a number of security practitioners that would really benefit from learning how to communicate, whether it's an online course, whether your company offers communication training on how to communicate a message, what's a key message, who's your audience, tailoring that message to an audience. These are communication basics that, comes natural to some and doesn't come natural to others. So if you are not, if communication is not your wheelhouse or your sweet spot, there are resources for you, and I would definitely explore them.
I think the only thing I'd add to that is do your homework and understand who you're presenting to. So if you're presenting to the board, do your research on your board members, and do your research on your executive team, and do your research on your peers, and know their background, know where they came from, because that way you can tailor your message and understand what's the best way to communicate to them. But if you don't know what their backgrounds are, and you go in there, could be a resume generating event. You never know.
Yeah, I'm an introvert. I'm a severe introvert. I'm the opposite. I don't go to the vendor baseball games at the private suite because I'm looking for the door. Communication is but you can get communication skills everywhere. Join Toastmasters. They will help you immensely. Everyone who comes into my group, the first training course I assign is active listening, because listening is the hardest thing to do, and especially for young people. For old people too. But again, I see so many that the board member will ask a question and they're already formulating that answer and not hearing what the board member's saying. Then they spit something out and you're like, so that's a training skill. And that can happen. And I will tell you, for metrics, go find some quality engineers and let them look at your metrics.
I think the other thing I was going to add to that, because you brought up a good thing, is be uncomfortable in the silence. Be uncomfortable, or be comfortable in the silence, is what I meant to say, because you have to pause and let them digest it, whatever you're presenting, and maybe they have a question, and that's a coaching aspect for some people, that they don't like the silence, so they feel like they have to talk all the time. But you have to be comfortable with just letting it just be silent for even 30 seconds. And it's hard. It goes because it feels like it's forever.
I love that, because I've benefited from, executive speaking training. I also personally do some community theater. So the pause, and one of the things that we say is the power of the pause. So I love that you mentioned that, because a lot of times people just talk and 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 talk, and they never pause, and then the point just doesn't get across.
I would say each of those were very compelling, and what's really interesting is these are always fun because you realize as you go through too, what a great wrap-up, because we didn't talk about listening or the pausing throughout the entire 45 minutes, and I think it was really compelling, right? But that's the other side of communication, is not what we're telling up to leaders and peers and things like that, but also listening to make sure what we're hearing back and how powerful that needs to be too. So I think that's a really cool way that we ended up there. And Judy, I think that you were born for sales, because when you talk about all the research and those kind of things too, that's one of the first fundamentals that we're always doing all the time too, to stage our conversation. So that was great. I'd like to thank all the panel members, but I'd also, and let's get a group round of applause, I also want to thank all the vendors that were here today, that sponsored today. I think it was really compelling. And so please make time to visit each of the booths and make those peer friends with all the vendors that are here too. And again, thank you so much to our esteemed panelists, and hopefully it was compelling for you all. Thank you.